Happy Tuesday! Here we are again. So this is our second day of calculations, and I'm going to turn my screen. Okay, so our first problem is talking about dividing with decimals. So if you notice, I rewrote my problem because this first number, the 75 hundredths, is being divided by 25 thousandths. So I rewrote it, and remember, this is the first word that goes under the bar. This is the piece that I'm really having to pay attention to, just like we talked about in class. If there's decimals here, it means I'm going to have to move it, and any places I move here, I have to move under the bar as well. So seeing it this way, you can kind of get a good idea. So I'm going to move it 3 places here, which means I move it 3 places here. So now that you see, I've rewrote it because for me, this is an easier way to look at it. So remember, we also have to go back and do our estimate. Well, I'm going to use what I know for kind of talking about quarters and dollars because that makes it a little easier. I know that I'm looking at, I have $750, right? And I'm breaking that into 25, like groups of 25, so $25, right? Well, I know already that if I just look at 75 cents, I know I have 3 of these in 75 cents, right? And then I have a 0 on the end, which means anytime we see that, remember, we know that it'd be a 10. So my estimate, which I'm going to write over here, is going to be about 30. Remember, I'm going to review again. I have in 75, I know I have 3 groups of 25 and 75. Then I have another 0, which is the same as like times 10. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So my next step, remember, for any kind of division, just remind you of the steps: divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. We're going to start on the left. If I look at my 7, I obviously can't make a group of 25. So I need to move over and I look at my 75. Well, just like what we talked about, 25 times 3 is going to give me 75. So I'm going to put that there. Right? I divided up the 75 into groups of 25. Then I multiplied. 25 times 3 gives me 75. I'm going to subtract, right? I'm going back to my steps. And I get, when I do this, right, 5 minus 5 is 0, and 7 minus 7, there's my 0. I'm going to bring down a 0. I can't just ignore it and call it whatever. I have to repeat again. If I have 0 items, I cannot make any groups of 25. So I'm going to put my 0 up there, and I start again. Now I multiply. 25 times 0. Anything times 0 is 0. And then I'm going to subtract, right? Going that way. 0 minus 0 is still 0. And I have nothing left over here, and I'm at 0. So my answer is 30. And look, exactly the same as my estimate. That won't always happen, but it did in this case. Okay, so we're looking at our multiplication problem, which I rewrote. Now remember, same as we talked about yesterday, this is like the commutative. So that means that I can do that either way. I know since there's only 2 things here, I'm going to use that one as my second number because that means I only have 2 rows, which remember we call those add-ins, the things we add together. So the next thing we have to do is our estimate. So let's take a look. I have 9 and 41 hundredths. Well, remember, if this here is a 4, that's less than 5, which means that I'm going to kind of stay where I am. So this is the same. We're going to write above it 9. And then I'm going to do times 7.5, right? Or this is 5/10. Well, remember, this is a 5, which makes me round up. So this 7 becomes an 8. So times 8. And we know that 9 times 8 is 72. So my estimate is this answer down here should be close to 72. Remember, we talked about multiplying and dividing because we're making groups. It may be close to that or maybe a little bit farther than you would think, okay? Just because we're talking groups of something. So when we talk about multiplication, remember, we always start on the right. So 5 times 1 is 5. 5 times 4, because remember, we have to go through to each item that's in there. 5 times 4 is 20, so I'm going to put a 0, and because I'm still multiplying, I move over. I put that above it, sorry, to carry it. 5 times 9 is 45, plus 2 is 47. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but because I'm starting with my tens, I'm going to make sure, so I want to go closer so you could see. When I'm starting with my tens, remember I have to put a number to save it. That's my placeholder, right? And then I'm going to do 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 4 is 28. I'm going to carry my 2. Look, I'll just use that one. 7 times 9 is 63. 64, 65. I'm going to draw my line and I'm going to add. I'm going to start on the right when I add. 5 plus 0 is 5. 0 plus 7 is 7. 7 plus 8 is 5. Carry my 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. Plus 5 is 10. Carry my 1. 1 plus 6 is 7. And now I go back because now I remember my decimals. This is where they come into play. So I have 3 decimal places. I can do that in my problem, or I can look in my original. Remember, decimal places are the numbers after the decimal. So because there are 3, I'm going to move it over, start behind it. Remember, if you don't see it, that's where it is. And then that's where it will go. So my answer is this, 70 and 575 thousandths. Okay, remember, we don't read that 70.575. How'd you do? Okay, and now we're on to our division problem with our multi-digits. So I'm going to make my estimate actually, let me write the problem first. Okay, so I rewrote my problem, and maybe that helps me to see that. So remember, my first number, whenever I use the word, like I have 369 divided by 49, that tells me that this is the number that goes under the bar, and that's what's being split up into groups of 49. So to make my estimate, just like we talked about in class, I'm going to make it a little bit easier. Remember, we make an estimate. It doesn't have to be exact. So 49, I don't know about you, but it's easier for me to work with 50. So I'm going to call this 50. And I know that I want to get to this way. Well, I know that 50 times 7 equals 350, right? Because I know that 5 times 7 is 35. And then remember, we talked about anytime we have a 0 after it, it's like putting a 0 at the end. Well, you know what? 350 is going to be pretty close to 369. Since I know that 350 is only about 19 away, I know I cannot make another group of 49. So my estimate, just so you know where I'm talking about, this is going to be my estimate, right? Remember, we talked in class before about the opposite of division is multiplication. So now once we do this, and this is why some of these problems are not so pretty, right? Because we're going to start here on the left. And when I do that, sorry, that's hard to balance. Okay, when I start on the left, I know that 49, if I have 3 items, I cannot make a group of 49. Let me write my steps again. Okay, so my division steps again, right? I'm going to divide. So I'm taking a look. Well, if I have 3 items, I cannot make a group of 49. So I have to kind of move next door, and now I'm using 36. If I have 36 items, let's stop for a minute, and I'm going to ask you to think about this. Which is bigger, 36 or 49? I sure hope you said 49, which means that I cannot make any groups of 49 if I only have 36 items. So now I have to go next door, right? And I'm going to use this. I'm going to use my idea here of 7. So I'm going to use my idea, and I made a problem over here that's 49 times 7. So we know we start on the right. 7 times 9 is going to be 63. I carry my 6. 7 times 4 is 28. Plus this 6 gives me 34. Well, 343 is less than 369. So I'm going to put this at the top as my 7 groups, because that was when I divided it up. Right? 369 divided into groups of 49 gave me 7 groups. When I multiply 49 times 7, which we did the work over here, we get 343. And then I'm going to subtract. And remember, when I subtract, I start on the right. 9 minus 3 gives me 6. 6 minus 4 gives me 2. this number here, my 26, is less than 49. So now I could keep going, just like we talked about in class. Put a decimal, and keep going. We're going to use what we talked about in class. Instead of doing like in elementary, we put our 26, remember? We're going to put our 26 over 49. This is where our facts are so important, because I know that 26 and 49, that is my lowest terms. So that's going to stay. So my final answer is that. And let's take a look. This is really close to my estimate, right? So then my answer makes sense. See you tomorrow.